This episode is brought to you by Perspective Space, a community gathering venue in Encinitas, California that fosters mindfulness, sustainability, creative expression, and connection. More about them later. Hello and welcome to another episode of In the Art Scene podcast, a show that unites creatives from all over the world in sharing inspiration, life stories, business knowledge, and love for art. I'm your host, Galina Marquez, and I invite you to explore a new angle of the multifaceted world of arts and creativity. As always, the show notes will be on our website, intheartscene.com. And now, let me introduce my guest. This episode is showcasing one of many talented San Diego artists. I am very deeply passionate about our local arts community and very excited when I have a chance to bring my fellow San Diegans on the show. This passion led me to start a new project, SanDiegoArtDirectory.com. It's a free platform that serves as the ultimate hub for all things related to the rich tapestry of arts and culture in our county. On the website, you can find events, workshops, arts organizations, information about the shows and concerts, anything that an art lover like you may want to see and experience in San Diego. And for my fellow artists, there's an information about the open calls, grants, and other opportunities, services, venues, and many other resources to help you advance in your art practice. And you can post on San Diego Art Directory too. Join SanDiegoArtDirectory.com, create a free account, and start posting your listings today. And don't forget to sign up for our weekly email updates. And now, let's get to today's guest. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to In the Art Scene podcast. This one is special because I have one of my absolute favorite humans on the podcast, my dear friend, my art grandma, Bea Gold, who you might remember from the very first season. She was talking about her life story. But today's episode is going to be about some specific topic. Bea just published her second memoir book with her own illustrations. I am just so proud to be a part of this project. She brought me in to help with the book design, to go through the publishing process together. That was just a blast of joy. And the book itself is so interesting. For all of you out there, artists and creatives, you will just appreciate this, how much soul be put in that book and what this is about. And it's actually it's a very unusual kind of a structure. But okay, I'm gonna just shut up because I want Bea to start talking about this book. Hi, Bea. Welcome to the podcast again. Always happy to have you.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
All right. So you just received the first copies, the paperback and the hardback, and that's a tangible proof. That's a tangible something that I know you had ideas for the last few years, probably for as long as I've known you. So can you describe a little bit, not a little bit, you can describe as long as you want.
Okay.
What is this book? What is this book? What's the title and what's the content?
The title is Shopping with Mama, and
Mm-hmm.
the content is my thinking as I grew up that I loved watching my mother cook. And every time I picked up something to make something new, I thought, I loved watching her. She never had any paper in front of her. She didn't know what size the cups were and how many ounces was in anything, but she cooked and loved cooking. I don't even know if she really loved cooking or it was just what she had to do because it was she had to feed people, and she grew up knowing that that was a role that she had to have. So watching her was really special. And I was an only kid, so that her attention to me was always very direct and very purposeful. And mine to her was very direct and very purposeful. And it was just a combination of things that made cooking and living and thinking and being part of a culture that was very unique. And I concentrated in the 30s and 40s because there was such an upheaval at that time. There was so many things, much worse than today, as I must say, because it hit the depression where people were out of work and suffering, and it hit the Second World War, where kids were going off to war to be killed, and so on. So the 30s and 40s were very, very busy, unique, hard times and interesting times for all of us. And so the first book, Tell Me a Story, focused on those years as well. And they were just little tiny stories about people living and the kids growing up. That one took me from a very early childhood through teenage. This one concentrates just on what the topic is rather than the growth of the kid. So the topic in this one is both the fact that the 30s and 40s did not have supermarkets at that time. So every item of food was sold in a different little store, maybe a little big store, but a little store. And so thinking about it was, oh, that's another little story. And because my mother was a storyteller, I'm a storyteller, and I encourage everybody to be storytellers because that's how we learn about the world. So this book, then the first I want to talk about the introduction, which is the part of the book that brings us into where we are. It takes, and it's my story and it's my family and what I learned as a kid. And I realized as I was doing this that I had a lot of holes in my knowledge because I was a child. And so I started doing for this book research, which was turned it into a very interesting activity for me. I just cleaned up my stuff and I found that the research was a giant folder of stuff that I just
Amazing.
ran through. Did
Amazing.
you say?
Yeah,
Oh,
amazing.
okay. Anybody, do you want more? Are
Yes,
you
go ahead. Yeah,
listening to
just
me?
go.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So the research pointed out all the individual things that had much more information than I had when I just used the word, the name. All of a sudden, pickles became something that was a big article about how you made pickles or how they were made in the 30s, because all of the research I did focused only on the 30s and 40s, not current. So everything I did was like, oh, that's how they made that. I didn't know they made it that way. At any rate, so that's how the whole book came to be. And so the introduction brings all of that flavor to the book. Then the book itself was each store provided a story. And in writing it, I put myself back into childhood. And so each store became a little, oh, I didn't know it was like that. Or being really interested in going with my mother. Oh, Mama, you like that? I didn't know you liked that one. Oh, maybe you can make it that way, Mama. So I remembered one little part that was interesting was that our family was not a religious Jewish family. We're Jewish, but not religious. And when my mother told me stories about everything, of course. And so she was telling me a story about being Jewish and being a religious Jew. and what kinds of things the religious Jewish person did. And so I listened to that story and I thought, it's very interesting. We used to enjoy going to visit our family on Friday nights when there was candle lighting and so on. And we loved going there, but we ourselves were not religious. So when my mother told me that story, I said, Mama, how come we don't do that? Then you could make a nice challah. Because she was telling me how they made challah. If we do that, then you would make challah. That was kind of the way I grew up, listening, doing, thinking, criticizing, asking for help, and so on. So that was the background of the story. Then the individual stores that had the food meant that I then looked at what made that store unique. And each store then has a little story that talks about the store itself. And then, because it was unique and interesting, I thought the way we really would know the store better is by putting recipes in. So each chapter is a different store, and each store has a different little story about it. And each store has recipes that include the food that's sold in that store.
Yeah, no, it's a thank you for explaining that. And I am actually fascinated by this book because it is such a heartwarming combination of the memoirs written in the voice of a child in your own description, um, and also the comfort foods that you experienced as a child. And a lot of that, actually, for me, being Eastern European, like a lot of that is kind of comforting for me and bringing me that sense of home. Although I grew up in the 80s and 90s, right? And it's a totally different environment. But there's something in this book that I think appeals to everyone who remembers themselves as a child eating that comfort food made by mom or grandma. The home kitchen, the stores were, because I was remembering how I was shopping when I was a kid in the late 80s and 90s, and what kind of stores were in Moscow where I was growing up, and the long lines, perestroika, and the
Oh.
ridiculous prices, and the shortages, and all kinds of interesting stuff. And I mean, it has nothing to do with your stories, but that sense of remembering how it was, how it tasted. It's just, I think it's universal for everybody. It's
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I really love that you put a really long introduction to this book. The introduction is like 16 pages long, but it really puts you in the environment of the 30s and 40s in New York, and in the community where you were growing up, and what was going on globally and nationally, the war and the depression. And so it really gives a sense of, then you're reading about that child and then putting that context of what was going on at that time with the experience of the child. It just gives it so much more depth and perspective. It's amazing.
It's interesting to me now to be reading the book. It's just, and I keep thinking every time I read it, I go back into that feeling of that's what was going on at that time. And so I think that's what makes this book unique, that it's not just a history. It is a history. It's as if people are interested in the 30s and 40s, it's a good book to look at because it tells a bit about that time. But also, what it seems to me, because it feels like it to me. Even though I'm reading it, I wrote it, I'm come back to it and I'm reading it and I jump back into being a kid. And it's the issue of what do children experience? What do they feel like? This is not an adult intellectual book. If
Yeah.
anybody wants an adult intellectual book, they have to go to a library and find it. This book is really much more a social, emotional. It's strange to say it, but it had feeling as I wrote it and as I think about it and as I read it today that had to do with the feelings of the kid. How do you grow up? What what's the relationship between people? If your mom is very close, and in this case, because of the being an only child meant that she was mine all the time. I did not have anybody to have to challenge about her relationship. She was mine. And so everything that I learned from her was mine. And she was a fantastic teacher, although she didn't know it. So she was intelligent. I'm not saying that she was not an intelligent person. She was intelligent, but her experiences had not to do with the current world. It had to do with that world. And so looking at writing it was brought up a lot of both emotional and intellectual because it was all new stuff to me, writing. So
Yeah.
I'm happy to give it to people because I really loved it. And so I'm happy about it. The other piece was that in doing this, I was able to bring my artwork in a little bit by doing the woodcuts. I love doing woodcuts. And in this case, it was a, I had tiny little pieces of wood in my house. And I thought, okay, great, I'll make something in it. And so I did story a woodcut for each of the chapters that is a depiction of the major thought about it. And so it was fun to do. And I like having it in the book. It makes the book much more interesting, I think, because you turn the page and there's another picture. What's that? So anyway,
Yeah.
it was fun. Yeah, go ahead, go in.
Sorry for cutting you off. I just wanted to bring our listeners up to speed and remind them that you are a painter and a woodcut artist. So you're a printmaker. And this is so the first book was fully illustrated by you with paintings about 9 by 12 size of in full color. This one has 4 by 4 black and white woodcut prints as illustrations for every chapter and for the main cover. Um, so and I just wanted to give people the perspective, and of course we will have visuals in the show notes and the links to Amazon where you can buy both books. They both are absolutely amazing. And another cool thing about shopping with Mama is that not only it is a very interesting historical perspective from a little child, but it's also a great cookbook. Like those recipes are like real recipes, and I know that you have a mixture of your own recipes or your family recipes and some recipes that you found, and they're all Jewish, like Ashkenazi, Eastern European, Jewish type recipes. And I'm telling you guys, some of them are so delicious that you just will want this book to live in your kitchen.
Very good. It's true. As a matter of fact, I went looking again at the recipes and they're interesting. Each one concentrates on what the food is in that particular store. And so when you go through, it really hits you that the appetizing store had some very interesting recipes. I never even thought about it because you go in, you buy a fish, and you leave. But in this case, it was looking at the fish and what do you do with it? So it
Yeah.
was fun.
Yeah, that's right. And also, you have some interesting stories that explain, for example, different types of borscht, right?
Oh, yeah.
That I mean, this is interesting for me because I'm the one who grew up with borscht, and like every woman in my family, two different grandmas who grew up in different areas of Russia, my mom and my aunts, every single one had their own, like we're all the same family. Every single woman had their own version of borscht. And that was very interesting to me to read about those different types that were in your childhood because they're different from what I grew up with.
Well, what was interesting about borscht and what was fun in the story is that it's not just a beet thing. People think of borscht as being beets, but borscht was soup to this community of Jewish people. And it was borscht made with beets, borscht made with cabbage, borscht made with sorrel,
Hmm.
and then the varieties of those as they're cooked, with meat, no, with sour cream. And because the Jewish religion prohibits the use of meat and dairy
Dairy.
in the
Hmm.
same thing. So there was a borscht with dairy, there was a borscht with meat. No, you can't stir the sour cream into the meat borscht. No, that goes in the other one. So it was an interest. It just, I think in the story, as I recall, the little girl, me, says to my mother as we're walking out of the um, produce market where she's carrying these beets, and I say, "What are those things?" And she says that beets, blah blah blah, and tells me a little bit, and then I say, and she says to me, "We're going to make borscht when we go home." I said, "What do you mean make borscht? You told me yesterday we made shav borscht. That was a green borscht. How could this one be a red borscht?" And so this becomes the kind of play between mother and child that I experienced because we were not very, I want to say there was a relationship between us that allowed the kid in me to be very challenging and the mother being very willing to answer and not criticize because although she did say some funny things to me when I was, when I blew bubble gum on my face, she'd say, "Get that off your face," that kind of thing. Because the book also includes not just the book with recipes, but a number of items that were stores that didn't have recipes, like the candy store, and and the relationship still shows up in those stores. There's one that's a
Confectionery.
oh, I lost
Yeah.
confectionery, thank you, store, which was only used for giving gifts. We never had chocolates in the confectionery store, which had some fancy boxes of chocolates. We didn't have that for ourselves because we didn't have that kind of money. And that was the other thing in the book, the issue of how you did things when you were really poor. And did you know you were poor? Because if people use their abilities to give you a sense of happiness, a sense of feeling good about yourself, you didn't know you were poor. You were not um, you were not unhappy in your poorness. So that's another bit of life that changes, I think. So anyway, I loved writing the book. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah, this is actually a very amazing perspective, what you just said about being poor and feeling whether you're poor or happy. And it just puts life in a different perspective. Like, what do you really need in life to be happy? You want to be fulfilled in your relationships, you want to have a happy family, you want to have, food on the table. It doesn't have to be a restaurant table, right? you, you want to have a roof over your head, and the roof doesn't have to be, made of gold or anything like that. It's just uh, yeah, and I think it is very important in this in our times, because we are forgetting those things. Sometimes we have, the world has changed. We have access to way more things and places than people used to have back in the 30s, 40s, especially during the tough economic times and the time of war. But we just, we humans are strange animals. We immediately take all the good things for granted. And
Yeah,
yeah,
that's that's true.
yeah. So having a little bit of perspective, I think, is very healthy for all of us. Yeah.
Now, it's interesting because some of the reasons that you enjoy life when you're poor has nothing to do with how much you have. It has to do with what you're doing right now and what kinds of pleasure you get out of what you're doing right now, whether it's a story, whether it's food, whether it's a relationship with somebody. But it's an immediate sense of who you are and where you are.
Let me tell you about the new friends and sponsors of the show, Perspective Space. Perspective Space is a unique venue in the heart of Encinitas, California, open for individuals and companies that promote mindfulness, creativity, sustainability, and connection through their practice. The space is open and bright and well suited for art shows, yoga, photo shoots, sound healing, art classes, workshops, and other community gatherings of up to 60 people at a time. Perspective Space is a project by Think Parallax, a local sustainability strategy and communications agency that generously opened up its office for the local art community during the pandemic. I interviewed the CEO, Jonathan Hanwood, in Season 8, Episode 6, and I'm dedicating several episodes in this season to feature their artists and residents. To learn more, go to perspectivespace.com or click the banner on intheartscene.com. It's perspectivespace.com or click the banner on intheartscene.com. Let me ask you a question. What was your favorite? And I know that this is a dumb question to ask, but if you have a favorite story or a favorite recipe in the book, what they are?
Well, it's interesting when I think my favorite in terms of just looking at a group of things is the Borscht stories
Uh-huh.
because it's separate from the regular store and individual food in the store. This one was so much of one solid thing that gave a sense of who the people were, what the community was, who the mother was, who the kid was. And it just kind of brought it all together. It's at the end of the book. It maybe should have been at the beginning of the book. Who knows? But it's the thing that I feel the most, that gives the best picture of who we are. Who we
Yeah.
So that's one. And what was the other question? Or was it one
The
that I filled both?
Yeah, I think you did. I think you did. And that's actually my favorite part of the book as well, because again, it just put me back in like in my environment, in my community, in my childhood, and the types of borscht that I experienced. And it was prescribed to mix sour cream with meat borscht where I was growing up.
Well, you should have. It is delicious. It
Yes,
is
it is.
very good,
Yeah.
but it was not a part of the laws. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
it's funny.
I also wanted to quickly touch on the experience of publishing the book, because I think that that's also an interesting aspect to for our listeners to know about, because you are not a writer. You are a writer, you're a storyteller, but this is not something that you are doing often or all the time. You wrote and published two books, uh, and I think you went through the same publishing company. And I think some of the steps for so first of all, why it is interesting for me. I'm a visual artist, just like you are. I have this weird dream in my head that one day I will write a book and I will somehow have to publish it. And so going through this process with you was actually a very great learning for me. And it also, you know, gives us the perspective that when you're a creative person, you don't have to just stick to one craft and one medium. You can do all of it, and there are ways to do it. Even if you are experienced, you still can pick it up and figure out how to do this. So um, let's just quickly walk through some uh, steps of how you chose the type of publishing, because it was not a self-publishing, but it's also not the publishing with a big house. It's a hybrid. What is a hybrid publishing, and what do we have to do? And I will also talk a little bit about the file preparation. I'm not going to go into
Yeah,
the technical details, but we prep all the files ourselves, which is also not the typical. Even if when you self-publish with the help of this kind of a company, they usually like to do it themselves. But that was important for us to do it on our side, so we get the book that we envisioned.
yes,
Yeah.
and yes, and I'm thinking while you're talking about some of the issues. I did the first book I published. I cannot remember how we picked the publishing company. The second book, I got really into what are publishing companies, and so I found somebody who was a professional in this realm, and she took me through the different kinds of publishers there are. So there are the regular publisher that you see all the books on the shelves where people have submitted their information to become a book, and either they're accepted, and that's why you hear all of I was rejected 10 times, because they're looking for specific artists, writer artists, to publish. So that becomes a really difficult thing. You have to make your mind that, okay, I'm willing to do this and I'm willing to go through the negative. And if you don't feel that because you have had experience, it's really difficult to do that. The second one is the self publishing. And there are a couple of areas in the self publishing which you have to think about and know what it is. The first one, and the one we used, is the I just lost the word. The
Hybrid.
hybrid, right? Is the hybrid publisher, where they act as a publisher to help you get your book to market, but you also have all the requirements of being a self-publisher, which means that you own the material. You pay for it though. You pay all the way along. Where the first one, there's no exchange of money. Either the book is accepted or not. And in this one, there's no question of acceptance because it's yours. And so you go through it, and the hybrid publisher provides all of the steps to take you from a piece of paper to a book.
Hmm.
And you may or may not like what they do, but that is their job and their role. They'll let you know whether it's working, whether it's not working, and take you through to the end. You may not be happy at the end, so you can say, well, we can do it differently or what have you.
Yeah.
The
But
other, and then the third one is simply your own publishing, which means that you're responsible for everything to get it to market. Well, we start with what Galina and I did was to start with what we saw as a book. And that's very different than what uh, the hybrid publisher usually does. Usually they get words on a paper and they take the person through it. I don't know how other artists work. But for us, because we're both artists, Galina had the picture of the book in her head. I had the writing, but also the picture of the book in my head. So we had to coordinate that. The publisher, on the other hand, had a lot of information about how each piece would work, which we did not have, even though I did the other book. The other book was done with the same publisher and
mhm.
was also a hybrid book that was hybrid, but I don't remember anything about it, except I had the paintings, I had the stories, and I wanted them to make the way I wanted it, not the way they wanted it. And so the issue of giving up control, in part, is what publishing is all about. If you have to give up control, you're normally working with the way the hybrid publisher wants you to go.
Yeah.
They want you to, they would like a piece of paper with your story, and they'll take you through to the end. When you come in with having your own ideas, it becomes a challenge to them to figure out what they're doing. So it's not as easy as having a piece of paper with nothing on it, because you're just following what they're suggesting. In this case, you may quarrel with them because you
Yeah.
want it to be your way and they see it as not quite the way they want it. They see it. It's not what they want, it's what they believe it
It's
should be.
it's more about they have systems, and
Yeah,
those systems work for them, and it's easy. It's a cookie cutter kind of thing. And
right,
but we don't back away from challenge, right? So we
right,
decided, first of all, we chose an unconventional format. If you imagine your standard paperback, it's kind of like what, 5 by 7 ish size paperback book that kind of fits in the shelf with all the books of the same size, right? Ours is square. It's 8.5 by 8.5. First of all, because we went from the idea that your woodcuts, the illustrations, are square, and each
right.
of them has its own place at the beginning of each story on a separate page. So the illustration comes first, and it takes the center of the page with some margin around it, and then the next page, the title of the story begins, and then you have a few recipes at the end of the story, right? So we wanted to be that way. We wanted to give space. The proper space to the illustrations to shine, right? Not bury them inside the text, because it's a very visual and tactile. It's a piece of art.
Because we're
Yeah.
artists.
Yes.
How,
it's a piece of art. So we had to work on the files ourselves, and I am lucky to have experience with InDesign from my marketing years, and I still have Adobe InDesign on my computer. So that was something like, so B gave me a title of a designer of the book. So, and I was working on it, and we not only we uh, had to face some pretty strict requirements that the publisher gave us for the self-prepared files. There were also things like, so they still put some limits on us, right, of what we can and cannot do with the files. But there are also things like they don't take any responsibility if something goes wrong. They only give us like their pre-press would check it once and give us the recommendations, and we adjust the files and we send it back. But if there's something else wrong with it, they would charge us for the additional reviews. So it's kind of a weird feeling. We've done all the work and paid
Right,
for it. So for
right.
every review and for every file change, we had to pay. We didn't pay
That's
them to
because,
to do
yeah,
that. We paid them so they would allow us to do that. It,
right. That's
it's
because
crazy.
they're set up for people to come in and say, "Help me," and you
Yeah.
take it over and bring it to the end.
Yeah.
And everything that we brought into it was a challenge for them that they really were not particularly interested in. Okay, so you did it that way, but we'd rather have it just tell us what you want.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. And we are purposefully not naming the publishing company in this episode because, again, we cannot, from the very little experience that we had and with the challenges that we had to go through, again, being needy artists and not knowing how things in the publishing world work, uh, we just cannot say whether it was a good choice or a bad choice for us. Maybe there is a different company that we just didn't find that would have treated this project in a different way, or is it a standard for the industry or something like that. So we will not purposefully recommend and put the name of the publisher, so you guys don't, like, you will have to do your own research and
yeah,
find people who are experienced with different types of
well, I
publishers.
did also, Galena, I did a lot of research before we went back to this company, thinking I would find something different. But as I went through, I ended up believing that they're all pretty much the same and that I had already known this company and it was easier for me to just move with it again.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it was in any way a better company at all,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it was familiar.
Yes, and you had an account with them already, and the first book
Yeah.
came out pretty good. So yeah, so that was a familiar choice. Well, that's our story. Uh, and honestly, I am really grateful for you, even like asking me or letting me be a part of this project, because I have learned so much. Like, on top of the skills that I already brought to the project, knowing how to put files together in InDesign, that has been uh, a journey for me of really, you know, I treat this book as a piece of art, and that was a true collaboration. You have done all the contents of the book, but I felt such a big part of this project, and I experienced the birth of this artwork.
I adored being with you. So you know that, and everything that every inch of the way it was, Galina, what do you think? Which was one of
Yeah,
the really special things
yeah.
that we had going back and forth between what do you think?
Yeah, and I know some things took a little longer than I anticipated, and I know that you were impatient in a way, and I'm thankful for your patience, and we got to the final result, and the book is now available for purchase. So you guys go to the show notes and find the information about both books, links to the Amazon listings for both books, because both of them, not only a great read, they are an amazing gift to someone in your life. Seriously, both of them. And they're very different. Both of them are very heartwarming. It's the labor of love. It's the original illustrations by the author, Bea, illustrated both of them. Yeah, it's I I have I have my copies and I will cherish them. I mean, Gregory is going to grow up with them. Seriously.
Well,
It is
that's good.
it is an amazing product, and it's a really amazing work of art.
Thank you, Galina. That is very nice and feels very good. Thank you.
On top of that, we are putting together a website, and by the time this episode is live, Bea's website is going to be live. Again, the link is going to be in the show notes. It's beagoldartist.com. I think I got it right. Beagoldartist.com. And you will be able not only find the information about both books, you will be able to see a gallery of Bea's work that is, goodness, like 80 years worth of work, more than 80 years worth of work. And Bea is not, limiting her memoirs and stories to just these two books. She's got some blogs that she's written in the past in different platforms. So we're gathering them all together. And those are, again, a very, very heartwarming stories about her life, about her family, about her experiences as a mother, as an artist, as the member of a community. You have to listen to the first interview we had in the first season, and I'll probably put the link to it as well in the show notes, because if we're going to recap everything about Bea's life, we're gonna need another hour for sure. So just check out that interview. Check out beagoldartist.com to read more of Bea's stories and see her amazing art. And I think we will even put the link to your Etsy store where you sell your amazing woodcut prints. Why not?
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming to the show. I was really I was kind of impatient because I really wanted to share this project with the listeners, and we were just waiting for the first copies of the book to arrive so we can say yes, we got to that finish line. We have the book. So it's amazing. Thank you so much, and thank you for being in my life. You're really my art grandma. I love you.
You too. Bye.
Bye. We'll see you next time in the art scene. Thank you for joining me for this episode of In the Art Scene. Show us some love by sharing it with your friends and giving it a raving 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can support the show by donating through Buy Me a Coffee or purchasing our merch. Both links are available on our website, intheartscene.com, where you can also find the show notes for each episode. Have an inspiring day, and I will see you next time in the art scene.